For a long, long time, the global rulebook was pretty much written by a small club of wealthy nations. But that world, it's changing, and it is changing fast. What we're seeing today is the rise of a whole new global rivalry, a real contest for influence between the established powers, the G7, and a challenger that's growing bigger by the day, the BRICS. And this quote from the Carnegie Endowment really just hits the nail on the head. It gets right to the core of what's happening. Is this all just some friendly competition, creating more options for a more diverse world? Or are we staring down the barrel of a deep global divide with two totally competing visions for our future? To even begin to answer that, we've got to understand who these players really are.
All right, so first up, let's talk about the incumbents, the Group of Seven, or the G7. For most of the last half-century, this group has been the main architect of the global economic and political system we're all living in right now.
So who exactly gets a seat at this very exclusive table? Well, the G7 is this informal club of the world's leading industrialized democracies. The best way to think of them is a group that's bound together by shared values, a belief in free markets, democratic government, and a pretty specific vision for how global policy should work, on everything from trade all the way to security. And for decades, let's be honest, their combined economic power was just completely unmatched. Okay, now for the challenger, BRICS. This group didn't just pop up by accident. Oh no, it was formed with a very clear purpose, to create an alternative to that G7-led order, a brand new stage for the world's major rising economies. And if you look at how BRICS has evolved, it tells a really fascinating story. It started out as just BRIC way back in 2009, an economic idea that pretty quickly became a political reality. Then South Africa joined in 2010, giving us the S in BRICS. But the real turning point, the moment things got serious, was 2014. That's when they put their money where their mouth was and created the new development bank. And then bam, the real game changer in 2024, a huge expansion that just massively increased the group's size and influence. And if you want to understand this new reality, all you have to do is look at the people. Just look at the raw numbers. The G7 countries, they represent about 800 million people. The newly expanded BRICS, over 3.3 billion. That is a staggering figure. We're talking more than 40% of the entire world's population. It's a seismic demographic shift that is fundamentally redrawing the global map right before our eyes. And the economic picture? It's just as telling. I mean, yeah, the G7 still holds the biggest single slice of global GDP, but the BRICS nations have become an absolutely formidable economic force. These aren't just emerging economies anymore. They've emerged, they have arrived, and their piece of the global pie is only expected to get bigger. So all of this begs a really important question. What is the big appeal here? Why are so many countries, especially from the global south, so eager to get into this club? Well, the reasons are both strategic and, honestly, they're pretty layered. First off, it offers status, a seat at a new high table for powers that have felt for a long time like they've been overlooked. Second, it's about access to finance, being able to tap into institutions like the New Development Bank, which, by the way, often come with fewer political strings attached. Third, it acts as a kind of diplomatic hedge. You can think of it as a support group for countries that are feeling pressure from the West. And finally, it all comes down to a shared goal of system reform, a real push to build a world with many poles of power, not just one. Maybe no one put it more bluntly than India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. When he was asked why a group like BRICS is even necessary, he just said, because you won't let us into the G7 club. That one sentence just perfectly captures this feeling of exclusion that has really fueled the whole search for an alternative. And listen, this rivalry goes way beyond just making statements at summits. This is about building real, tangible, parallel systems with totally different rules, different priorities, and completely different centers of power. Just take a look at global finance. For decades, the G7-led IMF and World Bank were basically the only game in town, and they often pushed for what's called the Washington Consensus. Well, BRICS has directly challenged that by building its very own financial architecture, the New Development Bank for things like infrastructure loans, and the Contingent Reserve Arrangement to help members get through financial rough patches. And make no mistake, the NDB is a serious player. By early 2024, it had already given the green light to over $32 billion for almost 100 different projects. It is actively funding the roads, the bridges, and the power plants of tomorrow in its member countries. This is real money making a real impact. The competition is just as heated when you look at infrastructure. On one side, you've got the G7 with its Partnership for Global Infrastructure, trying to rally $600 billion with a big focus on transparency and private investment. This is a direct answer to China's massive Belt and Road Initiative, which has funneled huge amounts of state money into giant projects around the world, though, to be fair, it's also been criticized for issues with debt and a lack of transparency. Okay, so you've got two major blocks, both building out competing systems, both trying to win friends and influence people. So what does that mean for everybody else? How are other countries supposed to navigate this new global game? The first comparison that probably jumps into your head is the Cold War, right? A world split into two rigid ideological camps. Is that what we're heading for again? Well, the answer, according to more and more analysts, is no, not really. What we're actually seeing is something way more complicated and a lot more fluid. Welcome to the era of multi-alignment.
So what is multi-alignment? It's a super pragmatic strategy. Instead of picking one team and sticking with them, countries are building a whole portfolio of partnerships. They might work with the US on security, with China on trade, with Europe on green tech, and with the BRICS Bank on development, all at the same time. It's all about maximizing your options, not pledging loyalty to a single side.
And you can see this strategy playing out all over the world. Look at India. It's a key member of the US-led Quad Security Group and a founding member of BRICS. Or Brazil, which keeps its ties with Washington and Brussels strong, but sees BRICS as vital diplomatic cover. And how about Saudi Arabia and the UAE? They're deepening security ties with the West, while at the very same time joining BRICS to lock in relationships with their biggest energy customers. It's the ultimate have your cake and eat it too foreign policy. This quote, I think, just perfectly captures the mindset of this new multi-aligned world. For so many nations, the question isn't whose side are you on? They reject that question entirely. They believe their own power is greatest when they refuse to be put in a box, when they can engage with everyone to get the best deal for themselves. Which, of course, leaves us with the ultimate question. In a world that's not defined by rigid blocks anymore, but by this complex web of overlapping interests and flexible alliances, the old rulebook is officially being thrown out. The great geopolitical contest of our lifetime might not be about which side wins, but about who gets to write the rules for the next chapter.